Hello, I'm the pop culture alcoholic and I am suffering from a movie hangover. In fact, I've been thinking about this particular movie for about 3 years now. It's been one hell of a bender. And I kept thinking that maybe the time had passed. Maybe this film just wasn't relevant anymore. But apparently quite a few people still like this film. There's still sing-alongs going on at local theatres. They still play it at awards ceremonies. And I'll be honest, I've mellowed out quite a lot since the last time we saw each other.
And you die alone because we all die alone.
I don't need to be hateful or intellectually condescending to the things I review anymore. I mean, I could, don't get me wrong, I easily could. It would be really, really easy and it would be a lot of fun. But there is nothing clever about being angry and hateful and swearing. Instead, I'm talking about this movie because I think it needs to be talked about. I genuinely believe in 10 years' time, people are going to look back on this film and laugh at the complete misguided and manipulative nature of every monstrous quality of this film. And I just want to speed that process up a little bit. So, let's begin. This is a film about a group of people oppressed by the outside world for being different, who choose to show the world who they really are by being exploited by a man for profit, and that is the moral of the film. Honest to God, it is. I don't care how you interpret the music, that is what this film is about. Everything nice about it, no matter how irrelevant it is to the gross misportrayal of history, is lies. This film pretends to have morals when there are none. And first, let's actually just cover that history. In case you hadn't heard, P.T. Barnum was one of the most famously duplicitous and exploitative men in popular history, who owned slaves after it was legal, peddled people to death as tourist attractions, and believed everyone who ever gave him money was a dumb asshole. He is the hero of the film. And I honestly find this film quite hard to write about because all the levels of nonsense and just manipulativeness are so interwoven with each other that trying to hold them inside my head is like trying to grasp the concept of space-time or the scope of the universe. You know, it's just so complex. As I grasp it like snow, it melts through my fingers. But before we actually get to any of this, let's just sort of wind back, and I'm going to show you this little scene because I'm going to reference it later, about how they try to excuse the kind of moral destitute nature of this film, because they do try and excuse it. There's this one particular scene where P.T. Barnum is talking to a critic who quite rightfully has been calling him out throughout the entire film for being manipulative, exploitative, and basically a monster, because you know what a horrible bunch those critics are, encouraging people to use critical thinking, constructive thought, and trying to actually look through the manipulative media that's being shoved in their faces. And suddenly he has this like massive turnaround, and he has this to say.
Putting folks of all kinds on stage with you, presenting them as equals. Another critic might have even called it a celebration of humanity.
Indeed, that would be wonderful if that's what actually happened in the film, even remotely. I'm sure as equals, all the people in P.T. Barnum's circus could have worn the top hat and the red coat as much as they wanted, but they much preferred to be rooted down and narrowed down just to the physical attributes that made them worthy of putting on stage. We'll come back to this, because this is the bamboozler of movies. You know, they just throw so much at you so fast that they can cram in nonsensical dialogue and morals. But again, we'll come back to this. Okay, a bit of background. The Greatest Showman is a movie released in 2017, directed by a visual effects artist who palled up with the director of the last two Twilight films and the live-action Beauty and the Beast movie. Because you see, apparently these two guys saw Jackman at an award ceremony and they compared his action there to P.T. Barnum, and they told him about this. And Jackman, instead of, say, punching them in the face, went, "I'm in! Instant dream project, let's make this movie." You know, I feel like I really shouldn't have to tell you why this CGI fustercluck with the colour palette of a diabetic Wes Anderson isn't very good. Why this oh so progressive film about the acceptance of people who are different and not adhering to the traditional ideas of objective beauty that so generously and so thought-provokingly and so without the concept of social hierarchy offers barely more than a single line to any of the different characters in every other scene, along with no character development, almost no actual dialogue or character, and often no name. is kind of missing the point. Why this very same movie that tries so bravely to challenge those stale, old, fusty ideas about traditional objective attractiveness and then casts in the role of this deflating Mr. Bean. This guy. And for the backing up characters, let's have this guy and this girl. Oh, aren't we so progressive? Is kind of missing the point. Okay, so let's talk about the movie in general. The acting is okay, the singing is fine if you don't mind stuff that's been auto-tuned to death, and who can afford to these days? Jackman is whispering his way through many of the songs, which sounds terrible to me, but I'd be keeping my head down too if I were in this movie.
Sweat soaking through the floor. Just a dead man walking.
The dancing, of course, is also pretty good when it's not surrounded by CGI, but I do seem to have forgotten when it became normal to stop making it look like characters are actually singing at all during the song numbers, so it feels more like a music video than a musical number. I just don't believe it at all, and it completely sucks me out of the reality of the song. And the best part has got to be in this one scene where there's this woman standing on stage and she's singing a song about how you can never be too entitled and that's probably a good thing. And by the way, millennials' wet dream.
Let it stay this way. Can't let this moment end. All the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough.
I just don't remotely believe she's actually singing. And therefore, I can only come away feeling that the scene is kind of weird and uncanny because it's not real. And the whole film feels like this because the whole film feels like a music video. The movie goes from inspiring montage to inspiring montage at breakneck speed. The first musical number alone runs through Barnum's childhood so quickly, I'm never given time to get invested. It's like, so this guy here's my dad. He's dead, yeah. Oh, jeepers, I wonder what adventures await me on this mad. Well, that was a fine 35 years. I'm sure nothing interesting happened there. Most of the movie is told through unsubtle visual storytelling, which is so weird looking that you'd think that you were trapped in the Matrix if you saw it in your own life. There's also so many scenes that are just artlessly green screened. At one point, Jackman even steps into a cutscene from the Thomas the Tank Engine video games I played in the noughties. And to think cats needed repatching. And honestly, the dialogue is the worst part. It really is difficult at certain points to understand scene by scene, moment by moment, what's actually going on in the plot. Take this scene as an example. This particular scene takes place right after Barnum's daughter is snubbed by a couple of the richer kids in the neighborhood.
I mean, she just feels out of place with the other girls.
Well, I should certainly hope so. I've never seen so many little prima donnas in my life.
Okay, I'm with you so far. You don't want to be a snob because snobs are bad. That's fine. That's a premise we can all agree on. Let's carry on.
Yeah, but those prima donnas are the most important thing in the world to her right now.
She'll learn to ignore them just like I did.
She shouldn't have to.
Wait, a snob's bad, or do you want to be a snob?
New York society will never accept us. If they did, they'd have to stop judging and actually do something with their lives.
This isn't about me.
Who said that it was?
I just want her to be proud of who she is, of her family.
So the moral of the scene is that you should be wanting to get richer and snobbier. Why would I support this character? The movie gets away with every screwed up piece of morality because it just throws nonsense dialogue at you in very short little bursts, and then they just start sing-shouting over everything. It's la da 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 da. Let's not think about what's going on screen. Just can we all stop sing-shouting? I'm trying to work out what the morality of the scene is. So rich people are dicks, but I'm a dick because I'm rich. But if I'm not rich, then I'm not a dick. But also being a dick is bad. Also exploitation is good, but it's bad, but it's good. I can't concentrate because everybody keeps singing. Can we all please stop singing? I sung once, but I think I got away with it. And funnily enough, despite all this, the basic bones of the plot, which somehow has no moral connection with the soundtrack, manages to feel completely obvious and straightforward. P.T. Barnum is your typical down-on-his-luck, eccentric, innovative, break-the-mold kind of a guy. Basically what Slavoj Žižek would call cool capitalism. He's unconventional, ahead of his time, and rejects all those fusty old-fashioned ideas from those stuffed shirts at City Hall.
Play. Pay good money to watch people stand around and talk for 2 hours, and they call me a con man.
Indeed, you're right. Who would be so foolish to go to a theatre and pay money when you're just going to end up watching some piece of crap movie like this one? He has a life desperately crammed with whimsy and a big charming smile on his face that lets you know he is as relatable to you modern liberals as they come, while simultaneously hoovering up cash using deceit and trickery. in a sense, exactly what this movie is doing. I mean, I don't want to get hung up on the history of this thing again, but P.T. Barnum was horrible. And this movie is just clearly romanticizing him, painting this rich white guy as the savior of the outcasts. And it does even a terrible job at that. Even in the film, whilst they portray him enjoying contention and wanting to rile up the public, causing hate and violence intentionally.
You know, people aren't gonna like it if you put us on the stage.
Oh, I'm counting on it.
I tried you freaks! Your master's calling!
That's quite enough, sir. Reprint this review in every paper in New York. Half-price tickets to anyone who brings it in.
The savior story arc becomes completely irrelevant because they decide by the end of the film that Barnum was doing the right thing the entire time. He learns no lesson and the show is still made the same way it was. The film wants to make you think that it's being progressive, but it still completely supports putting people on stage because they are different. Constantly drawing attention to the fact that they are different, and that apparently is why we should pay attention to them. Not because of their personality or their talents or anything that's human about them, but solely because of how they are strange as a physical object. Just taking the whole idea of representation matters to the false conclusion where it is just all representation that matters and not the type of representation that's also important. And that in itself is again exactly what the movie is doing wrong. And we'll see that it can't even do that bit right.
A celebration of humanity.
And the movie is so keen to remind you that it is okay that it is lying to you, and such a person should be seen as a hero.
Does it bother you that everything you're selling is fake?
Do these smiles seem fake? Doesn't matter where they come from, the joy is real.
I believe those are the words of a scoundrel, Mr. Barnum.
A showman.
Step right up and put your ignorance on the table. Please, we happily invite you to come on in and accept everything that we tell you. We are officially talking out of our asses. Even the show, which Barnum is supposedly using as a positive representation, he actually calls
Another sideshow novelty.
a line in the film that we can all happily glance over because he is right. Do I really need to point out any more of the obvious lies in this film? Yes, and again, we will come back to this. So Barnum has an idea of starting a living museum after he meets a dwarf. Somehow the film completely avoids saying the word freak show for a minute, and apparently we are meant to be fine with what is going on.
You want people to laugh at me?
Well, they're laughing anyway, kids, so might as well get paid. See a soldier, no, a general, riding across the stage with a sword and a gun and the most beautiful uniform ever made. People will come from all over the world, and when they see him, they won't laugh. They'll salute.
All right, I get it. It's like a fashion gig. You know, people will come to see it because of the uniform, not just because I'm a dwarf. Yeah, well, you know, it'll kind of be a mix of the two. But what if I wasn't a dwarf? Hey, let's just get you into that costume, shall we, and making us some money. Even whilst portraying Tom Thumb as a grown man, as opposed to Barnum's 4-year-old cousin who he adopted and forced into work, like what actually happened in reality, he still has to trick him into performing. I mean, and by the way, here's another thing that I'll draw your attention to about how this movie completely misses the point. The actor who plays Tom Thumb, Sam Humphrey, doesn't even get to do his own voice acting in this film. He's dubbed over by a regular-sized person. Thank goodness that people are being given such fair and true and honest representation in the media, both of course in Barnum's time, as we know from this film, and in the modern day, when things are just so much better. And I apologise for bringing this up again so early on in the review, but after the introduction scene, almost none of these characters will receive more than a single line of dialogue in every other scene, adding up to about 10 lines apiece in the entire movie. They almost never have any one-on-one dialogue with the main characters, and we know almost none of them by name. Excuse me, sir, got another page of this exposition-y wank here for you? Ah, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, gather round, my lovely diverse cast of equals, mind you. Okay, so here we go. Just snip, snip, snip. Okay, and here we are. Here's a line for you, little one, and here's one for you. Oh, and here's a line for you. That's an important one. You remember that.
A celebration of humanity.
Honestly, there's a really interesting essay in here somewhere about how portrayals of progressive ideas in media convey bad ideas of progression to real life audiences, whilst the film simultaneously attempts to be progressive to the real life audience at the same time. But I'm going to leave that essay to a smarter man than me because I hardly understand what I just said. We see from the beginning that Barnum likes controversy. He likes that people attack his performers because it fills seats, and he likes lying his ass off and painting people of different ethnicities as freaks. Barnum hires Zac Efron to help him with the exploitation because he realizes, even though he hates those awful upper-class snobs, he wants to be one of them. They get rich, and this leads Jackman to sideline the already sidelined different characters at social occasions. This is meant to be an overcoming oppression storyline when it is more like your every other mo money, mo problem story. And this is where the next big song number, This Is Me, comes in. And it's clearly meant to be this big sort of anti-oppression, overcoming controversy and society and the man who, by the way, is represented by P.T. Barnum in this particular circumstance. These people come busting out into the streets that are full of these hate-filled protesters so they can declare war on their oppression as freaks and show who they are, and then they just walk straight back into the freak show. You're literally presenting yourselves as freaks while singing This Is Me. You're defining yourself as a freak by somebody else's definition. I particularly like the idea of singing This Is Me whilst wearing a quite plainly fake beard. How much more blatantly insincere can you feasibly be? But the thing is, it may as well not happen within the plot of the movie because nothing changes after the song is done. Literally, it may as well have been a dream sequence for all that takes place in the film afterwards. It's just like it happens and then... Go back to your lives, people. Normal order has been resumed. They don't even begrudge Barnum at all. They never mention the fact that he sidelined them ever again, and they never overcome the controversy or conflict of not being accepted by society. Then the circus gets attacked, and the performers try to defend their arena of oppression using their inhuman superpowers. Honestly, what does this film think that it's saying? But the place gets burned down. So then we have this piece of rubbish scene with the critic.
Putting folks of all kinds on stage with you. Presenting them as equals.
Again, never happened. As if, like, the people were going to the show for the big song and dance numbers. And, by the way, the idea of critics drinking, I resent that. So Jackman is feeling down, and his friends pick him back up again, and then they do that again almost immediately afterwards. They have this big song about coming home and them being a family. What are any of these characters' names? What kind of a family is this?
Hello, my friends! Hey! Yeah! Eddie, you're in too! Pour yourself a drink!
Apparently Jackman has learnt his lesson. Not the one about exploiting people, of course. Silly. They get the circus going again, he hands over his hat to Shia LaBeouf and goes back to his family because apparently that was what the point of the film was all along. But really, the film has no point. There's nothing to, like, carry you through because nothing in the film makes any sense. It seems to think that it's anti-oppression and anti-capitalist from time to time, but this is how the film starts and ends, bookending the movie with this line that exploitation is good. That turning another person into
Another sideshow novelty.
for money is okay. And yes, I do appreciate that there is another side plot that focuses on the anti-oppression themes, but it is also so without any actual real character or development beyond racism is bad that it is not worth mentioning at all. Again, like this movie, never having anything to it apart from the novelty of trying to be progressive, which, by the way, isn't the same thing as sincerely wanting to make the world a better place or to be good to other people. It only means that you want to feel like that's what you're doing, and you want to make sure that it looks like that's what you're doing. In fact, because we never see that Zac Efron's character has any attraction to Zendaya's character other than physical, it completely undermines it, because both his love and the other's prejudice is only skin deep. But again, the film just lacks any kind of consistent morality throughout. Sometimes the film thinks that it's about inequality. Sometimes it thinks it's about chasing your dreams no matter what. Sometimes it's about family. Sometimes it's about art. But none of it really amounts to anything. Like, the big song number in the film is clearly meant to be this kind of overcoming prejudice thing. And clearly, going by the soundtrack, this whole movie wants to fall into the obvious anti-prejudice movie genre.
In a time where to be different was to be condemned.
They always have to have like that, the over-the-top, uninhibited white racist character, you know? You know that guy, he's a guy like, he's supposed to represent all the white evil, you know? He's like the dude they always have like screaming during the movie trailer. They'd be like, they were the first all-black swim team. Get out of the pool!
Because the fact that these movies, in all of their like real-life progressive ideas and their actual representations of what actual pains that people had to go through in the real-life history, exists and creates this kind of subgenre of movies. This film thinks that just because it's a period piece and it's aiming at vaguely the same ideas, that it can fall into the same category and get the exact same kind of adulation that those other movies get. Once again, this movie shoves most every one of the non-beautiful characters to the side and never gives half of them any character or anything to do outside of sing vacuous music. And yeah, the music in this film is fucking vacuous. I don't care if it helped get your mother through chemo, it's fucking bullshit. Apparently composers Ben Pasek and Justin Paul chose a pop sort of hip-hop style intentionally for the musical. Quote, "The choice was to express not just the character's feelings, but also how ahead of his time P.T. Barnum was. He wasn't just bound by the world in which he lived, he wanted to create one." Yes, because implying that a white guy created hip-hop is just the kind of thing that people love to hear, and is going to go down so well in how this film is remembered. You know, in most proper musicals, there's this thing where most of the songs that are sung are particularly to do with what's going on screen. Most of the songs are written to progress or develop what's actually happening in the plot, only making sense in the context of the musical. Crappy modern musicals, however, avoid this at all costs for one very obvious reason. It makes the soundtrack more marketable in a way that's not linked to the film. In The Greatest Showman, we get all of one song that is even that related to what is going on in the plot. Never a character name or specific event mentioned. Every song is just another bland jogging track. We're all coming out of our shell, and this just further undermines the whole message of trying to be overcoming oppression and prejudice, because all the rich white privileged people get to listen to the same music and they all go, "Oh yeah, this is me, this is who I am, I'm coming out of my shell, the world's just gonna have to deal with me, I'm great and we're all great for listening to and singing this song." It's like that Apple advert that they seem to play right before the movie when I go to the theatre at the moment.
Do you, do I, do we ever stop to question why we do what we do?
Somehow, with no irony whatsoever, this advert says, "Look how individual and creative you all are by buying the exact same product." And you can't help but bow to the manipulation, even as they're rubbing the fact that they're manipulating you right in your face. Seriously, anyone who likes that particular song can go to hell. They are literally telling you how you feel about them as they're singing to you. And just, I mean, how dare you, movie? How dare you tell us we love you? And how dare you tell us we're enjoying you? How dare you tell us that? And you know what? I'm not even done. The levels at which this film is screwed up is so myriad and layered. I swear I've still got a decent bit of material in me. The reason why the soundtrack for this film is so offensive is because it's so generic, and that generic nature only comes from fucking laziness.
That's so fucking lazy. You're a lazy fucker.
You're lazy.
Laziness penetrates every layer of this film. And when I say laziness, what I actually mean is exploitation. Exploitation of people's ignorance. Because despite the fact that what we get is a film about people who in real life were exploited for spectacle, we will still come away from watching this film feeling wiser, more progressive, enriched spiritually, because we want to feel like that. We want to feel like we are better people by singing the ballads of this supposedly progressive film. And the movie actually calls itself out on this.
And yet you have no trouble selling tickets.
It's because I'm selling virtue.
Exactly. The easy alternative to learning an actual lesson. Learning some half-baked one that does more damage than good. And this laziness in exploring the real-life lives of people who actually suffer at the hands of prejudice, and also this laziness at questioning and interrogating our own ideas, is what leads to true, proper, ingrained, under-the-level prejudices and stalls the progress of real-life ideas. Because most of us don't really want social change all that badly. Most of us just want to not have to feel bad about it anymore. That's understandable. But the thing is, we want to do that with the least amount of effort and actual introspection as possible. And that is not the key to real progress. I'm not the first person to say this. In the words of Martin Luther King, there is the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. It is the mistake of thinking that the absence of conflict means that everything's fine. Just because I haven't been forced to morally question myself and inspect my own moral ideas surely means that they are right, because nobody's pushing me to question them. But maybe not. Maybe it's just that everybody's kind of got it a bit wrong at the moment. Like I said, this is laziness. It's the same laziness that leads people to misinterpret, because of the source of information that is this film, the real-life events surrounding P.T. Barnum, and probably thinking after watching this that he was a real hero. No, he wasn't. If you do a bit of research, you'll see why not. And the same laziness, it allows us to overlook our ingrained prejudices, overlook the sufferers of prejudice and the actual plight of those people and their actual human nature. It also lets us overlook what good representation actually is, and it lets us overlook the prejudices that we have inside of us. I've probably said that already. It doesn't matter. The point is that the generic writing of this movie allows people to completely morally distance themselves from the truly nuanced moral nature of actual real-life events. Finally, the music itself, lazy in both conception and consumption. The music is marketable in this film due to it being ridiculously generic and not tied to the plot of the film whatsoever, using all the tired cliche lines.
Tonight, 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 blinded by the lights, wrapped up like a deuce, another runner in the night. I know you want me.
And it's the same laziness that means that people can completely fail to appreciate or question the moral ideas that are in this song that it's apparently trying to communicate. And honestly, is communicating on some level. It is still slipping it into your mind. And also, it allows the film to have this soundtrack, which is really popular, whilst completely ignoring any of the horrible things that are portrayed in the actual film. And the worst part is that, like I said, people don't even hear it anymore. They just hear the same hollow, repeated sentiment, the same sound bites that we hear over and over again, almost like buzzwords, and it's just this gut reaction where they can hear that music and think, oh yes, this sounds like something that I like, by which I mean everybody likes. Doesn't matter if it's actually saying anything or what the point of it is. It's not like every piece of media has some kind of philosophy, or in another way of putting it, an agenda. And just because they get to sing in these big Glee-esque full harmonies that makes it sound like some community, doesn't mean we should feel like we agree with everything that they're saying automatically. These songs are being heard, but they're not being questioned or understood, and we allow songs to be written so poorly and so generically that they don't really have to mean anything. They can completely undermine their own moral ideas, and it doesn't matter. Like singing about fighting prejudice, but, you know, not really, because you can get away with saying that and nothing changing. And the worst part is, this is exactly where they would want us, with all of the commercial-driven film industry and all of the commercially driven music industry as well. Because you know why? Because hollow, meaningless sentiment is easy, and it's cheap, and it's commodifiable. We just have this system where they're endlessly spoon-feeding us with lazy, meaningless, positive feelings. And no progress is made, nothing changes, and the song or the film is for nothing but profit. And you know what? I bet old P.T. Barnum would have loved that. And that is why this film is worth talking about. Because it's like every single individual little aspect is just a metaphor for the awfulness of the entire film, and that film's awfulness in its place in pop culture at large. Just a series of expensive illusions. P.T. Barnum's greatest con to date, and he didn't even need to be alive to make it happen. And you know what? The best part? It didn't even work. Barnum and Bailey, the real-life circus, was shut down in 2017 after almost 150 years of touring. Funnily enough, the same year the film came out. And you know what? That's actually kind of sad, because a lot of people probably lost their jobs. But also, go fuck yourself, P.T. Barnum. Go fuck yourself in your grave. Go fuck yourself. I'm the pop culture alcoholic, and thanks for watching, because I really needed this. And it seems like a few people probably do too. Bye.